Hey, do you or someone you know work on an exciting sustainable solution that needs scaling? Why not apply to the Zayed Sustainability Prize and increase your reach and impact? The Zayed Sustainability Prize was established in 2008 as the United Arab Emirates Pioneering Global Award for recognizing organizations and high schools for their sustainable, innovative, and humanitarian solutions.
How will you feel if you win the prize?
Oh, very happy.
Today, the prize counts 15 years of global impact, with 378 million people around the world benefiting from its winner solutions across the 5 categories of health, food, energy, water, and global high schools. Now, they're adding an exciting 6th category called climate action. This special new category aims to recognize and promote innovative solutions that address climate change and protect the planet for future generations. If you know a deserving small to medium-sized enterprise or nonprofit organization that's working to promote climate adaptation and resilience and nature-based solutions, nominate them today for the Climate Action category. We're pleased that the Zayed Sustainability Prize will be sponsoring this podcast series. To learn more about the prize, visit zayedsustainabilityprize.com and submit your application before the new extended deadline of May 23rd, 2023. Wildlife conservation is crucial to preserve the nature that we have left on our planet. Today's guest, Shannon Wild, has been focusing on protecting wildlife in South Africa for the last 10 years. She started as a wildlife photographer and videographer, acting as a visual conduit between wildlife and the audiences of companies like the BBC, National Geographic, and Disney. It was after getting extremely sick and being bedridden for 6 months that she realized she needed to do things differently. And that's when she started Wild in Africa. Wild in Africa is a company that makes bracelets and donates its profits to conservation nonprofits around the world. They are currently making an impact in 17 countries, educating people about the importance of nature while protecting endangered species from further harm. This episode features Shannon Wild, photographer, videographer, and wildlife conservation specialist as part of our Women in Sustainability series. Hey Shannon, thanks so much for joining the Sustainability Champions podcast. It's great to have you on the show.
Nice to talk to you, Daniel. I'm excited to chat.
Yeah, it's good to talk again. It's been a little while. The way I like to start these conversations is by going big picture and really getting an idea of who you are and what is the Wild in Africa brand.
So I'm Shannon Wild. I'm an Australian that moved to South Africa almost a decade ago.
Wow.
And I started Wild in Africa in 2017 as like a way to make conservation accessible to the world through beautiful and ethical products. And so we focus on bracelets, but are expanding into other areas of jewelry and products soon. So yeah, that's the main focus.
Very cool. And before 2017, what were you doing in South Africa?
So I'm a wildlife filmmaker and photographer. So the bulk of my time prior to that was filming wildlife documentaries. So for the likes of National Geographic and BBC, Disney. And I do that. But I'm also CEO and founder of Wild in Africa. So that's obviously a big focus of my time and work as well.
Yeah,
but yeah, all comes back to wildlife and conservation, obviously. Yeah.
That's amazing. So, and it's obviously a very important topic because the more we hear about what's happening with the destruction of various forests and landscapes, wildlife and biodiversity is heavily impacted by that. I'm curious to know, because if you've been in South Africa for 10 years, roughly, that means you moved there in 2013. So it took you about 4 years before you started the Wild in Africa bracelet brand.
Yes.
So was there something in those 4 years that was happening as you were doing all of your work as a photographer and videographer that made you realize, actually, this is what I really need to do? Or was it something you always had in mind?
You know, it was a funny start on this journey, because the way Wild in Africa started was actually me getting incredibly ill, to a point that I was on a shoot in the Masai Mara in Kenya. And I'd pushed my body for so long. I'd been unwell for a while, but I didn't really know what was happening. I collapsed and had to be medevaced out to Nairobi. I was in hospital for a while. And the recovery was a bit unknown, but certainly going to be long. And it ended up being about 6 months
Wow.
of being pretty much bedridden, and then, a gradual journey back to health. And so, really, that was the catalyst for me, because I'd been in a position before where I was working directly with incredible wildlife conservation organizations. I felt like I was giving back. I was, a visual conduit between the public and these incredible organizations, and also just the beautiful habitats and the wildlife within it, and sharing that and the message. And so suddenly this was taken away, and I was incredibly frustrated that I wasn't able to give back in a way that I had before, or that I was familiar with. And so during that recovery process, I just started making bracelets, and then, quickly realized that I could sell these. And I had a fairly decent social media platform at that point. So I could sell these bracelets and generate funds for these incredible organizations that I knew personally, that I worked with, that I'd seen what they do. And so it just started from there and has exploded. So at the moment, we collaborate with 15 different charities, with more in the pipeline. Now, this is going to be a very big year. And by donating to them and working with them, we're making an impact in 17 different countries so far. So it has gone exponentially beyond what I first thought. And so even during my recovery, when I was then able to get back into the field as a photographer and filmmaker, this was obviously not something that I was willing to give up. It was making such a tangible difference. And it's such a visceral way for anybody to actually contribute to conservation. It can seem so far away or overwhelming, that there's so many challenges for habitat and wildlife, and so many issues, that it can seem overwhelming, certainly for the general public. And for those that don't get to visit places like here, or don't live here and actually get to work directly with these organizations, this is like a really easy but tangible way to contribute to that, and in a meaningful way. So Wild in Africa, our complete focus is not just generating donations and generating money for the conservation organizations, but also educating people. And now, instead of being a visual conduit between the public, it's now a wearable product that I can do that through, and bringing a lot of these organizations and the amazing work that they do to a wider audience. And then you actually feel like you have contributed, because you have, and you're physically wearing something that can be a conversation starter. So then it's like spreading the incredible message that these people, they work so hard and are making really profound differences. And it's amazing to witness it here on the ground. A lot of the charities that I work with are actually local to me. So I live quite close to Kruger National Park in South Africa. And so a lot of the charities are nearby, and then it's kind of expanded beyond that. And I've had the great privilege to work all over the world. So I've met then amazing charities that are all over. So, we support animal rescues in India. There's marine conservation in Fiji. Obviously, Africa is very well covered, many countries here, but we're still growing. And South America as well at this stage. So definitely looking towards expansion this year, and very much a global impact.
No, thank you for outlining that. And first of all, I'm sorry to hear about your the way that this started. It must have
Yeah.
been a very difficult 6 months and a scary
Yeah.
time. At the same time, it clearly was an important turning point in your life, despite the challenges, I imagine. And yeah, I wouldn't want that to have to be the way to do it, but sometimes I suppose that's what, yeah, you found a way to turn something difficult into
Yeah,
something beautiful.
you have to make the best of it.
Yeah. And I love this term visual conduit. It just makes me think
Yeah.
of, because you're absolutely right. I mean, I as much as I care about conservation and wildlife and all of this, there's no way for me to easily access that information. And if a
Yeah.
picture is worth 1,000 words, I have no idea how many words a video is worth, but it's like infinite practically.
Hopefully a
And
lot more.
exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's I think being able to share those kind of stories through videos, through photography, it really makes people feel that much closer and a part of it. And what you're doing with the bracelets, I think, is fantastic in terms of taking, especially this piece about education. I want to learn a little bit more about that. But, the one thing that I love about documentaries frequently is that it makes me want to take action afterwards. And sometimes there isn't much you can do. Sometimes it's just, here's the information, I'm all fired up, and then it's like, okay, now what? But with Wild in
Yeah.
Africa, a very simple step is buy a bracelet, support a nonprofit that's actually doing the conservation. And the last thing I'll say, and then I'll ask a question, is last time we spoke, which was on an Instagram live, and yeah, I don't, like I said, like we were talking about, we don't quite remember when it was, but maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
You very, very generously gave me a bracelet, which was, I believe it was an elephant one. It's the one with the tiger's eye. And
Oh, beautiful.
but
Yes.
yeah, I love tiger's eye, and I still have it, still wear it sometimes, and people compliment it
Good.
and ask me all the time what it is, where did I get it? And I think it's, to your point, it's actually still a bit of a visual conduit, because people see it and they ask, oh, what is that, and where did that come from? And I share the story, and some people love it. Not everyone fully resonates necessarily with conservation, but nonetheless, it's a beautiful piece, and they it's a conversation starter, to your point. So
Yeah.
going back to this,
Absolutely.
to the impact, because you want to grow a lot, and I do want to talk about education. So maybe I'll ask two questions or two types of impact here. You've mentioned that you're supporting 15 charities in 17 countries, which is amazing. Do you have any more figures in terms of conservation numbers, like how much if you're willing to share, how much you've donated maybe, or what you've donated, how much that's actually impacted in terms of hectares conserved or wildlife saved or rehabilitated, or whatever the case may be? That's
Yeah.
part A. And then part B, and I can re-ask this, is impact in terms of educating the outside world about what's actually happening on the ground.
Right. So I'll give a couple of examples with actual organizations that we work with, so that it's a little more tangible. So, for example, the one that you have, which is the South African Tiger's Eye, and it raises money for an organization called Wild Tomorrow. And so they're very habitat protection focused. So they absolutely contribute to wildlife conservation, but are looking at it from a core perspective that, obviously, if you don't have space for the animals, you have a primary issue there. So I don't know the hectares off the top of my head, but they have done an incredible job of purchasing land and then growing that land and working with neighboring properties to protect land that would otherwise be. So the first piece of land that they purchased and protected was going to be turned into a pineapple farm. So you can imagine that means a lot of clearing of the bush, and it's going to be just a lot of flat agricultural fields. And so that's a huge amount of habitat loss. So they were able to protect that. And it was a prime area because of how it joined onto an already protected reserve. And so they're extending the habitat for wildlife. And then once they've protected that, then they're able to reintroduce animals. They're able to open up like natural corridors so that animals can migrate naturally and just bring back the biodiversity in this area that was already starting to lack and be cut off from large areas. And then, of course, as they've grown that, they've also reintroduced a lot of animals. So they've done spectacular work. Another one that we collaborate with is an organization in Tanzania that is elephant focused. So what they have done is create beehive fences around villages where elephants have been coming in and having conflict with humans and also with their properties and their crops. And so, you know, one of the ways to mitigate retaliation from villagers that are having their livelihoods damaged and threatened, as well as their lives, and then of course in turn the lives of the elephants as well. They're creating beehive fences because bees naturally are very wary. Elephants are very wary of bees, and so they will generally avoid this area. So buying a bracelet is directly contributing to building a beehive that then protects this piece of land. The elephant can go without conflict, around to where it wants to go. And it's also then providing an additional income source and revenue stream for the villagers to then manage those beehives. So it's a really incredible way, to address what could be and generally is a complicated issue of human wildlife conflict, because we can't take the approach that it's one side all or nothing. We have to find a balance. The reality of today is that we have humans and we have wildlife, and we need to live harmoniously. So that is really quite incredible, because for every 5 bracelets that we sell, funds a beehive. So that's a nice tangible way to say, okay, this equals this. And so that's really exciting as we see, more and more beehives being put up, and them being able to expand that project into more areas.
Yeah. I love that story specifically, just because I'm
cool.
Sure each of these organizations have a wonderful approach, and it's really important to to highlight all of them, because they're each doing something important in the area where they're working. But what I particularly love about this one is just the simplicity of it. First of all, kind of makes me laugh that a huge elephant is scared of bees.
Right?
Just because there's bees you have beekeepers who are like, oh, I just got stung 20 times. Isn't that fun? And here's this massive elephant that has very thick skin and still scared.
Incredibly thick skin.
And they're like, oh no, a bee.
Yeah.
But the beauty of it is it's so simple. You're not using any kind of chemicals. There's no electricity. It requires zero power, practically no infrastructure. It's just such a cost-effective, simple way. And to your point, it's very win-win. It's good for the wildlife, and it's good for the people there too, because ultimately, aside from the fact that you're actually protecting both sides from any harm, that additional revenue source no one's going to say no to extra money, especially if it means that they get to
Yeah.
protect their property. And yeah, elephants can be extremely aggressive and
quite destructive.
quite destructive. They're
Absolutely.
huge. It's
Yes.
such a
Yeah.
brilliant idea.
Yeah. And it also goes back to the educational side of
Right.
things. So just taking a step back from the general public being educated by this, it's also that it's educating the villagers and the locals that this is not an animal to be vilified. You know, it's doing what it does. There are ways to work with that and around it. It doesn't need to be feared, and it certainly doesn't need to be vilified. And so it changes the attitudes of locals as well. And so, you know, the education is twofold in terms of the person that buys the bracelet and is able to wear it is educated on the issue, but so has the local who is actually directly impacted by that whole situation. So yeah, it's very, very important.
Yeah, and the more I've had these conversations on the podcast and the various Instagram lives, the more I'm learning and realizing that actually kind of the most important aspect of sustainability, whatever that term means, it's so broad, but within the context of, let's just keep it to our conversation within the context of conservation, really the most important aspect of conservation is education. Understanding,
Absolutely.
first of all, what are the challenges? You know, because if that pineapple farm that you mentioned in South Africa went through, that would destroy a potential wildlife corridor. But first, you have to understand, what is a wildlife corridor? Why is that important? So, education piece one. Then, education piece two is, okay, what can we do about this challenge, and what are our options? And in the case of that charity, or the one with the elephants, you know, build beehive fences, buy the property, protect the corridor, et cetera, et cetera. And that's why I really wanted to dig a little deeper into the education piece, just because it's so crucial.
And on that topic, if I could just highlight one of the other charities that education is a direct part of their organization, and that is a collaboration that we do with the Adventures of Pilly. It's an unusual name, but essentially so it's a bracelet that is actually two bracelets together. You buy it as like a pair, because it gives back in two ways, and that is there are a range of educational coloring books for children, and that started with a focus on Latin America, has now grown well beyond that, almost every conceivable part of the world at this point. But the books themselves, they're not just coloring books, they're conservation focused. So they're educating the children, and they're gifted to children, especially underprivileged children. So they're being educated on topics that relate to conservation and sustainability that is relevant to them. So, you know, if it's Latin America, then it's a Latin American conservation topic. And they've expanded this, like I've said, into many countries, many languages. One of their key focuses is being multilingual and extending that, so that that isn't a barrier for education. So they have incredible coloring books that they're giving out. And so the purchase of the bracelet funds that. And then in addition is also planting a tree in areas in Latin America that need reforestation. And obviously, so then they're planting like native trees, not just like random trees everywhere, specifically native trees. So yeah, it's a beautiful thing that you buy this bracelet pair, and you know that not only is a child being educated for the future, and in a fun, beautiful, and engaging way, you're also planting a tree as well. So it's the reforestation and the education hand in hand. So yeah, I definitely wanted to highlight that talking about the educational side of things, since that's like a core principle for that charity.
Yeah, it's a great story, and I think going back to what we were just saying, it's really a leaning into the fact that education is such an important part of the conservation work, because it inspires children, and I'm sure, especially with a coloring book, it's so approachable and it's so engaging, and they're
Yes.
actually part of it rather than just sitting and sort of passively absorbing information, which might
Exactly.
work
Yes.
for one or two students, in a classroom, but when you're actually coloring and you're thinking, oh wow, look at a lion, and and it's just a much
Yeah.
easier and approachable way. I'm curious to know, to move a little bit away from Wild in Africa bracelets and more to your work, since you've really been in South Africa, and I suppose it's related, but over the last 10 years, since you are so connected to the wildlife and to what's been happening, just, I mean, as you look for wildlife, you're seeing nature, and you know I'm sure you've noticed some changes, or not, but that's the question,
Mm.
is in the last 10 years, since, call it 2013, whatever the case is, and now it's 2023, have you seen any changes in the various national parks in terms of how well conserved they are, how easy it is to find the animals and the wildlife that you're looking for when you're going out to do photography and cinematography? I mean, has it the situation changed at all?
Yeah, it has. And I want to say for the better, but I would be lying, unfortunately. Certainly in my experience in the last 10 years, obviously the first thing that comes to mind, and especially being based where I am, near Kruger National Park, poaching is an immeasurable issue here. And there are a lot of people working hard to end that issue. But with the pandemic, and essentially an end to tourism, those tourism dollars mean that there's no way of paying for anti-poaching rangers or your general field guides that are keeping areas, supervised and under watch. I mean, just the people that are usually out protecting and observing. And certainly the financial impact that had also led to an increase in subsistence poaching, which is poaching for survival. So people that are poaching essentially for whatever they can get to feed their families, to actually eat the result. Whereas, the other side of poaching being for profit. So things like rhino horn, which is the biggest issue in this area. There's also a lot of corruption here, not just in South Africa, but throughout Africa, which makes things a very big challenge to, make a tangible difference. So once you combine those two things of people struggling to actually survive during that pandemic when everything shuts down, that certainly led for a dip in results and protection, and we're just starting to come out of that now. So it's been incredible to watch tourism pick up again here, and that money getting put back into the protection of these habitats and the wildlife that live here. Like we're finally now starting to see the volume of people needed, the rangers back, to actually being able to supervise, protect, get out there. And, in some cases, like one of our collaborations is with Saving the Survivors. And it's a group of wildlife vets who focus on treating poached and injured animals, wildlife, obviously specifically. So there's a big focus on rhinos that have been attacked in a poaching scenario, and if they haven't been killed, which is often the case, then they get involved to help in the protection and rehabilitation of those animals, and they've done incredible work with that. And so it's been like a really convoluted 10 years of especially knowing the people that are working so incredibly hard to protect these species. So it's nice to see that we're coming back out of that now. But it's just this huge fundamental issue here. And it comes back to the education, really, is that we don't need to be killing rhino for their horn for these ridiculous, fanciful end results that have been proven medically to it not be effective. Or, the horns are often used in like ornamental pieces. So as someone that has a company that makes jewelry, it infuriates me that there are so many sustainable and ethical products that you can use to adorn yourself beautifully. It doesn't have to be animal products. It doesn't have to be things that are completely decimating the earth. So that goes to ivory as well. And so not a major issue here in the part of the world that I'm in, certainly in East Africa. So up in Kenya and Tanzania, that is a huge issue with the elephant poaching. Also, more recently in Botswana as well. So yeah, that's like one kind of topic or area that I've seen has very much fluctuated over the last 10 years. But then, of course, just the climate instability in that you can't plan for seasons really anymore. So that has a huge impact on things like having major droughts. Like Kenya is going through an incredibly terrible drought, and that's leading to a lot of other issues. So not just a lot of wildlife and also livestock dying, and so people losing their livelihoods. That's then ending up in increases in human wildlife conflict and human conflict of the people protecting certain areas and the people that are just trying to survive through a livelihood that has now essentially disappeared. And then the other extreme to that is, of course, the flooding. I mean, South Africa, it's been so many countries, like we've all seen the news where there's been some really horrific flooding, and South Africa is one of those places. And just recently, we had cyclones come through, and so we border Mozambique, and they were hit incredibly hard. And so was eastern parts of South Africa as well. A lot of people losing their lives, and destruction of property and facilities and access to clean water. I mean, electricity. This country has a bit of a crisis with electricity as well, because South Africa hasn't gone down the sustainable energy route yet, and has been putting it off for so long that now we're in a major energy crisis. And it's a normal thing for us to have what's called load shedding, which before I moved here, I had no idea what that was. And so we're on a power schedule. And as we move deeper into that crisis, the power is off, obviously, more than it's on. And so it just makes general living, a bit more challenging. And especially knowing that nothing yet is being done to fix that, even though we know how, and so many other countries have and can and have shown, that a move to renewable energy is clearly the future. There's the challenge of of course, the whole fossil fuel industry and profits, and not sustainable long-term infrastructure being put in place. So when I first moved here, I didn't know about load shedding, and maybe the first year that I was here, we didn't have it, and over the last 10 years, and it's predicted to get much, much worse here as well. So
Well,
every single day is power on for maybe 2 hours, then it's off for 4.5, then it's on for maybe 2 hours, and that's the schedule. And then add on top of that, there's such a lag in infrastructure and maintenance that it's also going off for a lot of reasons anyway. So you kind of are looking forward to the power coming back on for 2 hours, but it doesn't because some place has not been maintained properly. And so it's there's so many, I could go on about the plastic pollution and microplastic issue. I mean, yes, there's been a lot that I've seen. And coming back to the education part, I think as a society we are certainly becoming more educated, and things like this, having this conversation and putting it out into the world, social media and the access that people have to information now, it's incredibly heartening to see that shift in my lifetime of attitudes towards climate and how we're impacting the world. Not just that, but being more conscious of our choices and coming back to sustainability. Like, this world and its resources are not infinite. We have to start living in a way that is more sustainable. And there's some really frustrating parts to all of this, but my overall attitude to it is cautious optimism, in that we're aware, and as a society we are becoming more aware and implementing ways to change that and be more sustainable. We're just taking a little bit too long.
yeah. Well, thanks for going through that. I mean, it sounds like a lot has changed, and hopefully with more awareness and education, we will continue to invest into the future, and set up the systems required that will make it possible to protect the environment and solve a lot of these issues. What would you say
and
is,
we are, which is heartening.
Yeah, that's I think that's the best part, is actually seeing that these things are coming together slowly but surely, I think. What would you say is next for you and for the Wild in Africa brand? You said this is going to be a big year, so what's next?
Yes, it's already been a big year, but exciting news for us, which we haven't officially released yet, I guess we are now, is that we're opening our flagship retail space. So
cool.
Congratulations. Yeah, that's very exciting. It'll be our studio / retail. So our beaders will create the bracelets from there, as well as people can come in and actually purchase. Up until this point, we've been purely e-commerce, so an online store. So now we're very excited that, and especially being here where we founded. So Hoedspruit specifically is a very special small town, but it's essentially a gateway to Kruger. So we do have a lot of tourists come through. So I think it's the perfect place for people to discover it that way. Yeah, we're bringing on more beaters. We're working with a lot more charities. So there's, different collaborations that we're doing. And we've also gone into the retail space aside from our own, but as a wholesaler as well. So yes, growing the brand, which is very exciting because it's, for us, everything is obviously handmade. So that means that more local people are being employed, and are having job security, as well as we're focused on creating ethical products that are long lasting. They keepsake quality. So we're it's not something that um, you wear for a few months and like, okay, done. Like it's beautiful pieces that we hope that people will pass down and truly cherish. And so for us, creating products that people will invest in more, and because we're not mass produced, certainly fast fashion is another huge issue. So it's we're so proud that we can give back to conservation, but also to, community employment as well. So yeah, twofold, very
Yeah.
exciting year.
Well, congratulations and wishing you all the best. It sounds like a very exciting year ahead with yeah, I mean,
Yes.
to open a retail shop, that completely changes the dynamic of the business, but it also, I think,
Yes.
especially off the back of, I imagine for tourists who have just been looking at all the different wildlife and seeing everything, it's a very motivational time for them to actually take action. And part of that education,
Absolutely.
it's the perfect opportunity to,
Yeah.
when you're feeling all excited about, wow, look at all this amazing wildlife and where
Yes.
we are right now. And here's a bracelet that you can buy. It works really well.
Yes.
So
And it gives back to protecting those areas that people have had the privilege to visit and witness. So
yeah, wonderful. And for anyone who wants to actually purchase a bracelet or see the work that you've been doing in terms of all of your cinematography, and your photography, where's the best place for people to go check it all out, follow you, etc.?
yeah, so my visual, so photographic work is at shannonwild.com. Very simple. And essentially you can find the bracelets website from there. That's quite easy. But that directly is wildinafrica.store. So you can shop our whole range. You can support incredible wildlife and conservation organizations. We have, the beauty of working with so many different charities, and each bracelet is custom designed specifically for that organization. Is a consumer can go on and they can choose based on where they want their impact to be, or they can choose it based on how it looks and what appeals to them. So there's truly something for everyone. There's a lot of variety on there as well, and ever growing.
Oh, fantastic. And as you continue to expand, I imagine you'll have, and yeah, like you said, ever-growing variety, and you can make an even bigger impact. But Shannon,
I
thank
hope
you so
so.
much for your time and for going through this with me. Best of luck with the power situation. And
Thank you.
and yeah, I think what you're doing in terms of education and the impact that you're having through the through your bracelets and through being a visual conduit still, I think it's a very important aspect. It's inspiring, and it's great to hear that you're doing what you can to make a big difference. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Such a pleasure to chat to you, and I'm so grateful always for the opportunity to share what I do and what I'm so incredibly passionate about. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks again for coming back. If you too are working on an exciting sustainable solution or innovation and are looking for funding, why not apply to the Zayed Sustainability Prize? This could help you get to the next level. The Zayed Sustainability Prize is the sponsor of this podcast series. Since 2008, they've recognized and funded the amazing and innovative work of nonprofit organizations, small and medium-sized enterprises, and high schools for their impactful, innovative, and inspiring sustainable solutions. You could be next. If you or someone you know is a champion in sustainability who's working on a solution in health, food, energy, water, or climate action, you can apply today. Small and medium enterprises and nonprofit organizations with sustainable solutions in health, food, energy, water, and climate action can win $600,000, while high schools can apply to the Global High Schools category and win up to $100,000. Apply before May 23rd, 2023. How to apply? Simply click the link in our show notes to begin your submission for the Zayed Sustainability Prize. If you want to connect with a member of the Zayed Sustainability Prize team, simply email them at info@zayedsustainabilityprize.com.